On a silent night in 2023, Steph Curry finds himself alone in his San Francisco office, holding a small wooden box that has remained untouched for more than 3 decades. His hands tremble slightly as he observes the familiar handwriting on the yellowed label. For my grandson Steph, open when you grow up and need to remember where you came from. But to understand why a 35-year-old man, four-time NBA champion and idol to millions, hesitates to open a box he has carried since he was 3 years old, we need to go back to 1991, when a promise was made by a dying grandfather and a farewell changed the course of a family forever. You can realize that some of life's most valuable gifts come packaged not in gold or diamonds, but in simple wood and unconditional love, waiting patiently for us to be ready to receive their wisdom. It was winter of 1991 when the Curry family received the call that would change everything. Wardell Curry Sr., Steph's paternal grandfather, and Dell Curry's father had been hospitalized after a sudden heart attack. The doctors were direct. At 59 years old, there wasn't much time left for the man who had been the pillar of the Curry family. Steph was only 3 years old at that time, but Dell still took him to the hospital for one last visit with his grandfather. The little boy didn't fully understand what was happening, but he felt the seriousness in the air and the sadness in the adult's eyes around him. "Come here, little one," said Wardell Sr., his voice hoarse but still carrying that strength that had shaped Dell throughout his entire childhood. Steph approached the bed timidly, his big eyes observing the man who had always seemed so strong and was now surrounded by machines making strange noises. Throughout Dell's life, Wardell Sr. had been much more than a father. He was his mentor, his first basketball coach, and the man who had planted in him the values of hard work and determination that Dell would later transmit to his own children. "Dell," said Wardell Sr., taking his son's hand, "I want you to give something to Steph when he's older. But not now. Wait until he's a grown man and needs to understand what it means to be a Curry. How is it possible that someone so close to death could see so clearly into the future of a 3-year-old child?" Wardell Sr. possessed that intuitive wisdom that only truly special patriarchs develop. With visible effort, Wardell Sr. picked up a small dark wooden box from the nightstand beside the bed. It was a box he had made himself years before, during his time as a carpenter, before Dell was born. "This box contains the history of our family," said Wardell Sr., handing it to Dell with trembling hands. "Inside are things that Steph needs to know about who we are, where we came from, and what it means to carry the Curry name. But promise me you'll only give it to him when he's ready to understand." Dell held the box, feeling its surprisingly significant weight. "Dad, how will I know when it's time?" "You'll know," Wardell Sr. responded with a mysterious smile. "When Steph is questioning his own legacy, when he's thinking about what to leave for his own children. At that moment, he'll be ready to receive what I have to teach." Naturally, this leads us to a truth about family bonds, that the most important teachings sometimes need to wait decades to be understood, maturing like fine wine until the ideal perfect moment. Wardell Sr. called Steph closer. "Come here, my boy," he said softly. Even at only 3 years old, Steph approached, and Wardell Sr. held his small hand. "Steph, you're still too little to understand what I'm going to say, but one day you'll remember this moment. You have something special inside you, something that comes from our family, that passed from my father to me, from me to your daddy, and now will pass to you." The 3-year-old boy looked into his grandfather's eyes, not understanding the words but feeling the importance of the moment. It was a connection that transcended age and comprehension, a bond between generations that would remain engraved in his memory even when language was still limited. "One day," continued Wardell Sr., "you're going to receive a very special gift from me. And when you receive it, you'll understand that being great isn't about what you achieve, but about honoring those who came before and preparing the way for those who come after." Dell watched the scene with tears in his eyes, knowing he was witnessing the transmission of something much greater than words. It was the passage of family legacy from one generation to the next. 3 days later, on a cold December morning, Wardell Curry Sr. closed his eyes for the last time, leaving Dell with a sacred responsibility, and Steph with fragmented memories of a man who had seen his greatness before he even learned to walk properly. During the funeral, Dell carried the box in the inner pocket of his black suit, feeling its weight against his chest as a constant reminder that there was a final conversation waiting to happen. But not yet. Not for many years. What's most impressive is how certain promises can shape the course of an entire life. Dell kept the box in a safe place and began watching Steph grow, waiting for the signs that would indicate the moment had arrived. During Steph's childhood and adolescence, Dell occasionally looked at the box and wondered if that would be the moment. When Steph was rejected by major universities for being too small, when he faced doubts about his ability to play professionally, when he became an NBA star, but something always made him hesitate. How many times in life do we carry responsibilities that we don't know exactly when to fulfill? Dell had lived exactly that for more than 3 decades, guarding a legacy he knew was valuable, but didn't know when would be the right time to deliver. Years passed, Steph got married, had children, won titles, broke records, and through all of this, the box remained stored away, waiting patiently for the moment that Wardell Sr. had foreseen decades before. In 2023, when Steph began reflecting on his own legacy and what he would leave for Cannon, Ryan, and his daughters, Dell finally felt the moment had arrived. It was time to fulfill the promise made to a dying man 32 years before. Great things come in small packages. And perhaps Wardell Sr. knew that true wisdom can only be received when we are in the exact emotional state to understand it, when our soul has matured enough to absorb lessons that go beyond words and transform into guidance for an entire lifetime. Dell Curry carried the weight of the promise made to his dying father for more than 3 decades. Watching Steph grow from a small boy to a global superstar, always questioning when would be the right moment to deliver Wardell Sr.'s last gift. What he didn't know was that each year of waiting was preparing Steph to receive a lesson that could only be understood by a mature man, family father, and aware of his own place in history. You can realize that some of the heaviest responsibilities we carry are those that involve honoring promises made to people we love, especially when these promises cross decades and generations. During Steph's childhood, Dell several times considered opening the box. When Steph was 8 years old and showed clear signs of exceptional talent for basketball, Dell thought, maybe it's time for him to know the family history. But he always remembered his father's specific words, when he's ready to understand what it means to be a Curry. An 8-year-old boy, no matter how talented, was still not ready to comprehend family legacy in the deep sense that Wardell Sr. had imagined. During high school, when Steph faced rejections from major university programs for being considered too small and too weak, Dell again considered delivering the box. Maybe it's the moment when he needs strength from the family, he thought. But Steph overcame these adversities on his own, developing the determination and resilience that would become his trademarks. Dell realized that the struggle was strengthening Steph exactly the way Wardell Sr. had predicted. How is it possible that a man who died in 1991 could have predicted with such precision someone's emotional moment in 2023? Wardell Sr. had understood something about personal growth that transcended time and circumstances. During Steph's first years in the NBA, when Steph was establishing his career and proving he belonged among basketball's elite, Dell thought, now he understands what it means to be successful. Maybe it's time. But observing more carefully, Dell realized that Steph was still building his own identity, still discovering who he was as a player and as a person. Delivering the box at that moment could interfere with this natural process of self-discovery. In 2015, when Steph won his first MVP and led the Warriors to their first title in decades, Dell felt a strong temptation to share the box. Dad would be so proud, he thought. Steph achieved everything we dreamed of. But again, something stopped him. Steph was at the height of individual celebration. It was about his own achievements, his own journey. The box contained lessons about family legacy, about honoring those who came before. This moment was still about Steph building his own legacy. Naturally, this leads us to a truth about timing, that recognizing the right moment is an art that requires patience, wisdom, and deep understanding of the person we're trying to help. In 2018, when Cannon was born, and Steph became a father for the third time, Dell seriously considered delivering the box. Now he understands fatherhood, he thought. Now he can comprehend generational responsibility. Dell even took the box out of the safe, where he had kept it for decades, and placed it on his desk, imagining what the conversation would be like. But he realized that Steph was still in building mode, building his family, building his professional legacy. He wasn't yet in the reflection mode that Wardell Sr. had described. During the 2020 to 2021 pandemic, when the entire world was forced to slow down and reflect, Dell thought it could finally be the moment. Steph was having more time with family, questioning priorities, thinking about what really mattered in life. But, observing the conversations he had with Steph during that period, Dell realized his son was still focused on returning to the courts, on winning more titles, on continuing to build. The reflection was happening, but it wasn't yet the deep reflection about legacy that Wardell Sr. had anticipated. What's most impressive is how certain people can maintain promises for decades, resisting the temptation to act prematurely, trusting in a wisdom that goes beyond their own understanding. In 2022, after winning his fourth title and first Finals MVP, Steph was clearly in a different place emotionally. He had proven everything he needed to prove, had overcome all doubts, had reached the absolute top of his sport. Dell watched Steph during the celebrations and noticed something subtle but significant. For the first time, Steph wasn't focused on the next goal, the next challenge. He was truly absorbing and appreciating the moment, reflecting on the journey, thanking everyone who had helped him get there. Maybe, Dell thought, he's beginning to transition from conquest mode to legacy mode. During family conversations in the months following the 2022 title, Dell noticed that Steph began asking different questions. No longer about how to improve his game or win more titles, but about family history, about lessons Dell had learned, about what really mattered in life. How many times in life do we need to learn the difference between being ready to receive something and being mature enough to understand it completely? Dell was realizing that Steph was finally crossing that line. In 2023, when Steph turned 35 and began deeper conversations about retirement, about what he would do after basketball, about what kind of father he wanted to be for his teenage children. Dell felt the moment was finally approaching. The confirmation came in a specific conversation in October 2023, when Steph said, "Dad, sometimes I wonder what Grandpa Wardle would think about all this. I feel like there's so much about our family that I never really knew." It was at that moment that Dell knew. 32 years after receiving the box from a dying father, the time had finally come to fulfill the most important promise of his life. Great things come in small packages, and sometimes life's greatest lessons need to wait decades to find ears ready to hear them, and a heart mature enough to embrace them completely. With reverent hands, Dell finally delivers to Steph the box he had kept for 32 years, having no idea that the discovery would reconnect 4 generations of family history and reveal secrets that completely redefined how Steph understood not only his own legacy, but the sacred responsibility of carrying the Curry name. You can realize that there are moments in life that function as bridges between the past and the future, connecting stories we thought were lost with destinies we're still building. It was a November night in 2023 when Dell called Steph and said simply, "Son, I need to show you something. Something your grandfather left specifically for you before he died in 1991. Steph was intrigued. At 3 years old, his memories of Wardell Sr. were fragmentary. Sensations more than clear images, feelings of security, and love more than specific conversations. "What is it, Dad?" "It's better for you to see in person," Dell responded. "Can you come here tonight?" An hour later, Steph was in Dell's living room, watching his father take from a safe a dark wooden box that had clearly been handmade decades before. The wood had a rich patina from time, and Steph could see tool marks that indicated careful craftsmanship. "Your grandfather made this box with his own hands," Dell explained, "and asked me to give it to you when you were ready to understand what it means to be a Curry. He died when you were 3 years old, but somehow knew that one day you would need what's inside here. How is it possible that someone can know the emotional future of a 3-year-old child?" Steph held the box, immediately feeling a deep connection with something that transcended his rational understanding. Steph carefully opened the box's lid. The first item his eyes found was a black-and-white photograph, slightly yellowed. By time, the image left him speechless. It was Wardell Sr., visibly young, kneeling in the backyard of a simple house, teaching a boy of approximately 12 years old how to hold a basketball correctly. The boy in the photo was Dell. "My God," Steph murmured, studying every detail of the image. "I do exactly this with Canon." "Yes," Dell said softly, "and I did exactly this with you. And my father did with me. It's how our family has always taught basketball. Not just technique, but connection." But it was when Steph turned the photograph over that emotion truly overwhelmed him. On the back, in Wardell Sr.'s careful handwriting, was written, "Dell Curry, 1976. Greatness isn't in what you achieve, but in what you pass forward." The phrase that Steph had heard Dell repeat throughout his entire life had originally been said by Wardell Sr. The legacy of wisdom was even deeper than Steph had imagined. Naturally, this leads us to a truth about family, traditions, that often what we consider our own values are actually echoes of voices that came before us, whispers of wisdom that traverse generations. The second item in the box was a yellowed envelope with the name Steph written in the same handwriting. Steph carefully opened the seal and unfolded a 2-page handwritten letter. "My dear grandson Steph," the letter began, and Steph felt a chill run down his spine. "If you're reading this, It means you've become the man I always knew you would be. When I held you in my arms at 3 years old, I could see in your eyes a special spark, not just talent, but character. Steph had to stop reading for a moment, emotional upon realizing that these words were written by someone he barely knew, but who somehow understood him deeply. This photo is from when I taught your father to play basketball in 1976. He was 12 years old and dreamed big. But more important than that, he had a good heart. Now I see that you inherited not only our talent for basketball, but our responsibility to use that talent for something greater. What's most impressive is how words written decades before can hit exactly the emotional moment when we most need to hear them, as if love could transcend time and space. Steph, I want you to understand that our family isn't defined by achievements, but by values. It doesn't matter how many titles you win or records you break. What really matters is what kind of man you are when the lights go out. Teach your children what I learned from my father, what I taught your father, and what I hope he has taught you. That true greatness isn't in what you achieve, but in what you pass forward. There's a third thing in this box, the letter continued. Something that belonged to my own father, your great-grandfather whom you never met. He gave it to me when I was young, just as I'm now giving it to you through time. Steph searched in the box and found a small, simple gold ring, clearly very old. Inside the band was engraved, Curry, 1920. This ring, Dell explained, seeing the discovery, belonged to Grandpa Wardell's father. It's over 100 years old. It passed from father to son for generations, always delivered when the man was ready to form his own family and continue the legacy. How is it possible that such a simple object can carry the weight of a century of family history? Steph held the ring with reverence, feeling connected to men he had never met, but whose blood ran in his veins. The letter concluded, Steph, you carry more than your own dream. You carry the dreams of all the Currys who came before. But more important still, you have the responsibility to prepare the way for all the Currys who will come after. Use your platform not just to be great, but to make others great too. Your grandfather who loves you through time, Wardell Curry Sr. Steph finished reading with tears rolling freely down his face. The box didn't contain just family, memories. It was a map to understand his place in a continuity that began long before he was born and would continue long after he departed. Great things come in small packages, and Wardell Sr. had packed a century of family wisdom into a simple wooden box, waiting patiently for Steph to be mature enough to receive not just gifts, but responsibilities that transcend any individual achievement. Holding the photo, the letter, and the ring, Steph finally understood that being a Curry wasn't about being the best basketball player in the world. It was about being a link in a chain of love, values, and responsibility that connected past, present, and future in a sacred unity. The discovery of the family treasure not only connected Steph with his history, but triggered a profound transformation in how he saw his role not just as an athlete, but as guardian of a legacy that transcends sport and extends through eternity through the generations to come. What Wardell Sr. had planted, decades before, finally bloomed in the most beautiful way possible. You can realize that some moments in life function as keys that open doors to understandings that forever change our perspective on who we are and why we are here. In the weeks following the discovery of the box, Steph couldn't stop thinking about the responsibility he had inherited. The ring from 1920 was now on his finger, and every time he looked at it, he felt the weight of more than a century of family history. "Dell," Steph said in a conversation a few weeks later, "I need to know more about our family, about the men who came before Grandpa Wardle. I want my children to know the complete history." Dell smiled, realizing that Wardell Sr. had been completely right about the timing. Steph wasn't just receiving the history, he was prepared to become its active guardian. Together, father and son began researching family records, talked with elderly relatives, gathered old photographs. Steph discovered that the tradition of excellence and character in the Curry family went back much further than he had imagined. The great-grandfather, whose ring he now wore, had been a respected community leader in his small town, known for helping needy families during the Great Depression. Work ethic and generosity had been family characteristics for generations. How is it possible that character traits can be transmitted through decades, like an invisible but powerful inheritance? Steph was discovering that he had inherited much more than athletic talent. Inspired by the discovery, Steph decided to create something that would honor not only Wardell Sr., but the entire family lineage. He organized a special meeting involving 4 generations: Dell, himself, and his 4 children. "I want you to know the history of our family," Steph said to Cannon, Ryan, Riley, and little Caius Chai. "I want you to understand that you are part of something much bigger than basketball or fame." Steph showed the old photos, told the stories he had discovered, explained about the ring he now wore. The children listened with that special seriousness that arises when they feel they are receiving something important. "Dad," Cannon asked, "when I grow up, will I receive something special too?" "Yes, son," Steph responded. "But first, you need to understand what it means to deserve it. It's not about being famous or rich. It's about having character, helping others, and always remembering that we are part of a family that values doing the right thing." Naturally, this leads us to a truth about legacies, that they are not preserved passively, but must be actively cultivated and transmitted with intention and purpose. Steph then did something that surprised even Dell. He decided to write his own letters for each of his children, to be delivered when they became adults and had their own families. "I want to continue the tradition that Grandpa Wardle started," Steph explained to Isha. "I want our children to have something tangible to connect with our family when they're facing their own challenges." For months, Steph worked on these letters, reflecting deeply on what lessons he wanted to transmit, what values he wanted to emphasize, what wisdom he had learned that could help his children decades in the future. Each letter was personalized for the unique personality of each child, but all contained central themes about character, family, responsibility, and the importance of using any success to help others. What's most impressive is how the act of creating legacy for others can transform our own understanding about purpose and meaning in life. Steph also decided to create a more public project honoring Wardell Sr. He established an educational foundation focused on helping children from low-income families, naming it the Wardell Curry Sr. Foundation in honor of his grandfather. "Grandpa always said that greatness is in what you pass forward," Steph explained during the Foundation's launch. "I want his name to be associated with giving opportunities to children who might not have them otherwise." The foundation became one of the causes closest to Steph's heart, not just because it helped others, but because he felt he was actively honoring the family legacy every time a child received a scholarship or opportunity. 2 years after receiving the box, Steph organized a special ceremony. He invited all the extended family, close friends, and some teammates to a celebration of the Curry legacy. During the ceremony, Steph officially presented the ring from 1920 to Cannon, now 10 years old, explaining that one day he too would pass it forward when his turn came to start a family. "This ring isn't just jewelry," Steph said to the audience. "It's a symbol that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. It's a reminder that each generation has the responsibility to honor those who came before and prepare the way for those who come after." How many times in life do we have the opportunity to transform personal gifts into blessings that extend far beyond our own family? Steph was doing exactly that, creating waves of positive impact that would spread for generations. During his speech, Steph also revealed that he had commissioned the creation of replicas of Wardell Sr.'s original box for each of his children, each containing special items, personalized letters, and family mementos. "When each of my children is ready, not when I decide, but when they are truly prepared to understand, they will receive their own box with family treasures," Steph announced. At the end of the ceremony, Steph visited Wardell Sr.'s grave for the first time in years, taking with him the original photo of his grandfather with Dell. "Thank you, Grandpa," Steph whispered, placing a hand on the headstone. "You were right about everything. I was ready exactly when you said I would be, and I promise I'll pass this forward the right way." Great. Things come in small packages, and Wardell Sr. had packed not just memories into a wooden box, but had planted seeds of purpose that would continue germinating for generations, proving that true love knows no time limitations and that legacies built with wisdom and patience can literally change the world, one family at a time. When the story of Wardell Sr.'s box eventually became public, it inspired thousands of families to create their own legacy traditions, showing that the impact of a wise grandfather in 1991 continued spreading throughout the world 3 decades later, touching lives he never could have imagined.